And while lawmakers hash out their new stimulus plans in Washington, lawmakers in California are getting back to work this morning, and they have been off for quite a while. Our Carlos Herrera is live outside the Capitol. There's a lot to do and not much time to get it all done. Carlos?
Yeah, Walton, a quick 5-week sprint to get those deals cut on those very special and specific impacts in our state here begins this morning here at the state capitol with lawmakers returning to work. Let's get a quick look at some of those items on the agenda this morning. Now, one of the biggest priority is replacing part of the $600 federal unemployment benefits if the new plan doesn't extend all of it. Since mid-March, 8.7 million Californians have filed for unemployment. Right now, Democrats in the state legislature have a supermajority which allows them to pass bills without any GOP votes. Lawmakers will also be busy discussing bills about policing and racial justice. Bills include things like banning police from using tear gas and neck holds, allowing independent investigations of police use of force, and decertifying police officers who are fired for misconduct to prevent them from getting hired somewhere else. They'll also be discussing bills that would prevent landlords from evicting tenants who can't pay their rent during the pandemic. Governor Newsom's current executive order gives local governments the authority to stop renter evictions through September, but the goal is to extend it all across the state. And healthcare issues include proposals that would make sure emergency patients don't pay more than their copays or deductibles, capping copays for insulin medication, and letting California manufacture its own generic drugs to bring down prices. As you mentioned, Walt, a lot to do, very little time. Most of the 55 standing committees will only meet one more time to discuss those bills by August 34th. So that, of course, is concerning because it limits the amount of bills that they can sign by then.
All right, Carlos, thank you. There's a lot on the plate today. We do appreciate it.